Most of the colonists who originally settled Litchfield County during the 1700s were subsistence farmers, producing not for sale, but for their own use. But during the 1800s, Connecticut agriculture went into a steep decline, and thousands of farmers took factory jobs in the burgeoning cities, or sought farmland in the more fertile plains of the Midwest. Some of the county's impoverished farms were taken over by immigrants. Others grew to brush and forest. But the growing cities of the eastern seaboard created a vast new market for a product whose nutritional value was increasingly appreciated: fresh milk. By 1875, milk from Litchfield County farms was being sold in Connecticut's industrial centers and even shipped by rail to New York City. To learn something about the history of Litchfield County dairying, I talked with two farm families who were neighbors of mine here in West Cornwall. Ralph and Thalia Scoville milk 40 black and white Holsteins on a rocky hillside farm that has been in their family since the original settling of the town 250 years ago. Frank and Polly Calhoun for 40 years ran a prosperous dairy farm in a fertile Cornwall valley. Frank's father, like Frank a graduate of Yale University, bought the farm 100 years ago. For many years, Frank was Cornwall's representative in the state legislature. Among other things, dairy farming is a job, and a hard one. Polly Calhoun described the day's work on their farm.
Well, Frank got up early and went over to the barn and fed the calves and separated the cream and loaded up the truck with cream and milk and came home for breakfast. And after breakfast...
I hope wasn't. My wife was up.
And after breakfast, he went off and delivered the milk. And in the winter, when he got to be in the legislature, he would rush off and do all this earlier and come home with the truck loaded up with the milk and cream. And then he'd get cleaned up and go to Hartford. Haying was when it was the busiest. The haying season was by far the busiest.
Wait till noon probably before you got hay would be dry.
And then it would run late in the afternoon, depending a lot on the weather. The people that got through cleaning up the barn, the people that got through washing the bottles, which was usually myself, and when they got all their little chores done, then everybody would turn to on the haying, and in the middle of the afternoon, two people would leave and come up to the barn and do the milking. And if it was late and there was rain forecast and there was a lot of hay down, everyone would work late. And the hottest and worst job was the being in the haymow and directing it and releasing it. And it was pulled up, I guess, first by horses, but when I remembered, it was pulled up by a truck or a car.
Dairying was also a business. A study of Litchfield County dairying in the 1940s proclaimed, essentially, the dairy farm is a factory. The dairy cow is a machine which processes the raw materials of grain, hay, and water and turns out the finished product, milk. While some farming is highly speculative, involving large and unpredictable profits and losses due to gyrating prices, weather, and demand, dairying is more stable, with long-term investment, steady demand, and a milk check coming in every month, rather than a make-or-break annual harvest. Dairy farming has required continuous modernization and mechanization. In the lifetime of the Calhouns and Scovilles, tractors have replaced horses, and refrigerators have replaced ice cut from a nearby pond.
Oh, that was a big change. The cooler used to be a pit with ice in it, and you had to put the 40-quart cans in and you had to pull them out again. And then it was a great big change and a great big investment when it went to a steel tank. And the trucks became tank trucks and would come every other day and back up and get out a hose and hitch it onto your tank and suck it out. Pump it out, I guess, would be a better way to put it.
Productivity has increased steadily over the years. It used to take 4 men to work the Scoville farm.
Now today, it's just the 2 of us. And with the machinery you got, you're covering a bigger area, and you're putting up more tons of everything with just 2 people.
Even the cows have become more productive through artificial breeding.
When you used to figure that an 11,000-pound cow, that's 11,000 pounds on a 300-day lactation period, based on that, it gave 11,000 pounds of milk. That was pretty good. Now it's increased to 15, 18, 22, 24,000 pounds a year by breeding, and they raised that.
Farms have become more concentrated. Ralph Scoville, for example, farms land of several neighbors who have abandoned farming. At the same time, he and other farmers have stopped trying to farm more marginal lands and have concentrated on the more productive pieces. Dairy farming is an easy business in which to get overextended. Ralph Scoville described one of his neighbors.
Their object in life was to milk 100 animals. They milked 100 animals. I'm not going to comment any more on that. And what did they have when they died? Nothing to speak of.
Farming here also entails a special relationship to the land. Steep hillsides scoured by the glaciers mean thin, unfertile soil, an unlimited supply of rocks, a constant danger of erosion, and a need to know intimately the character of each field.
You take now like it over at Cherry Hill section, it's a different type of soil, it's a lighter soil. You go over by Dutton's over there, it's a lighter soil, and there's more topsoil. What you got to be so careful up here is erosion, because you lose it, because you get those rivers started in it and you forget it. You can't control them. I mean, they'll just start those ravines that'll start, and well, it's a good example. You've seen it around the neighbors had it some of the places there that too long, they pushed their luck too long.
And farmers have to weigh the short-term gains of herbicides, pesticides, and other chemicals against their possible long-term effects on the land from which they make their living.
Of course, now with your weed control, now that's a touchy subject. We've got to have it in order to get rid of some of those weeds, but they have not yet to prove how many years that's going to be detrimental to the soil, how long it can stay in the soil. See, heavy soil, it's going to stay in it a lot longer than it will the sandy soils, because it'll leach away and it goes down, but where does it go? I don't know, into the water table or into wherever it goes into. But that's something that they'll sell you, and this is wonderful stuff, and it works good, but you're doing it at the chemical company's mercy, because you don't know how much you're using. And some of the stuff that I don't like to use anymore, and it doesn't always work any more than I have to, is these for the pesticides. Because that pesky stuff is bad.
If dairy farming was a job, a business, and a relation to the land, it was also a way of life. There was an old Yankee saying, a dairy farmer is tied to a cow's tail. The twice-daily milking was as inescapable as death or taxes. Both Scovilles and Calhouns employed hired hands.
But it was a family thing, and if the cows were out, everybody got up and left the table and ran out to chase them, get them back in again.
Thalia Scoville makes clear the economic advantage of family farming.
We started out, you sit the first of the month, well now, which bill can I pay all of, which bill can I pay part of? And we started out that way, and gradually it's become, because we had children that were of age, that they could be of some use, and that was really, things began to look easier when you didn't have to hire help.
Connecticut farmers could usually find better paying employment elsewhere. Those who stayed usually did so by choice.
It was wonderful. It was damned hard work, but it was a wonderful way of life.
A 1986 survey of farmers in Litchfield County found that 86% of those surveyed wanted to keep their operations going or even expand them in the future. The study concluded, there appears to be a strong nucleus of farmers and landowners who are satisfied with their lifestyles and or choice of occupation. This nucleus could be a valuable asset in any effort to preserve open spaces in the state and preserve the agricultural industry. But at present, farms are vanishing, and farmland sold for other purposes fetches tens of thousands of dollars an acre. Frank Calhoun.
I think that the dairy business is really on the skids. There's some people that have there's no time for small operations.
Family farms.
Yeah.
Well, also people coming in offering people such huge prices for their farms has made it impractical for people to keep them.
The Calhoun's farm is no longer in operation. Ralph Scoville and his son Fred continue to work the Scoville farm and adjoining land rented from neighbors. When I asked him about the future of the farm, he replied,
It depends on what kind of people how many, if they're too money hungry, because if they get money hungry, you're losing stuff all the time. We deal a lot with rented land. You're safe one generation, but the next generation, what happens? You see, what we try to go on a 5-year lease with an option on another 5. If you don't, forget it. But we got some we can't work that way, they don't want it, so what are you going to do? You may wake up tomorrow morning and say, here, we're going to put a condominium in there. So there you go. Then you tighten your belt and just hope that you can continue on what you got.